The galaxy had many wonders, but none so confounding, so maddeningly absolute as the great maelstrom, a swirling vortex of gravitational shears, hyper-energetic storms, and reality-bending distortions. It loomed at the edge of civilized space like a hungry god. Every species that had attempted to traverse it had been shattered against its relentless fury. For 10,000 cycles, the maelstrom had mocked explorers, traders, and empire builders alike. The Zalari, the most advanced physicists in the Orion Arm, declared it an impassable anomaly, a fundamental limit of cosmic reality. The Verkari, proud navigators of the galactic core, lost entire fleets in their attempts. The Syndicate of Eldarim, whose wormhole technology had conquered 100 systems, had seen their greatest minds go mad trying to calculate a safe passage. The verdict was universal. The maelstrom could not be crossed. And then the humans arrived. The Galactic Council was still adjusting to the inclusion of these upstart primates. Though young by galactic standards, they had already disrupted economies, rewritten scientific doctrines, and embarrassed militaries with their reckless ingenuity. They had proven themselves persistent, a word that many elder species found either amusing or terrifying. So when the first human ambassador, a grizzled ex-Navy officer named Daniel Kessler, leaned forward in the council chambers and said, "We'll get through it," the room erupted into laughter. Ambassador Drillnax of the Zalari clacked his mandibles in condescending amusement. "Your bravado is noted. Human, the laws of the universe do not bend to mere determination." "We don't need them to bend," Kessler said, his blue eyes like chips of steel. "We just need to understand them better than anyone else." The council dismissed it as yet another human folly. Even the more sympathetic species, like the Threxians and the Corvari, quietly pitted their soon-to-be-lost expedition. But as the humans began their preparations, something unsettled the council. They weren't sending a fleet. No dreadnoughts. No colony ships. No battle-hardened armadas bristling with experimental shielding. Instead, they sent a team, a handful of the most brilliant minds humanity had to offer. Scientists, engineers, daredevil pilots. They called themselves Project Odysseus. And they were going to do the impossible. Chapter 1, Into the Storm. The ISS Odysseus was unlike any ship the galaxy had ever seen. It was small, barely the size of a corvette, but every centimeter of its frame was reinforced with experimental materials. Layered shielding interwove electromagnetic, gravitic, and quantum-stabilizing fields, each designed to counteract a different aspect of the maelstrom's chaos. Its engines, a terrifying blend of human ingenuity and borderline reckless energy manipulation, were built not for speed, but for adaptation, reacting in real time to unpredictable forces. But most crucially, it had a crew unlike any before. The team. At the helm was Captain Elias Rourke, a former deep space test pilot with a reputation for cheating death. So often that his colleagues half-joked he was a statistical anomaly. His steel-gray hair and calloused hands spoke of experience, but was his eyes, sharp, calculating, endlessly stubborn, that told the real story. Beside him sat Dr. Anika Voss, the mission's chief astrophysicist, her mind a labyrinth of quantum equations and high-dimensional physics. A pioneer in adaptive space-time navigation, she had once piloted a probe through a collapsing neutron star's gravity, well, just to prove a theory. The engineering team was led by Chief Samuel Mac McAllister, a no-nonsense genius who had grown up in the deep space scrapyards of Mars. He believed no system was perfect, but every system could be made to work, with enough sweat, swearing, and percussive maintenance. And then there was Lieutenant Jun Wei, their navigator, half mystic, half mathematician. She had an uncanny ability to feel space-time distortions, reading the eddies of gravitational flux as easily as an artist saw color. Some dismissed her as eccentric. Those who had flown with her called her a miracle worker. As the Odysseus approached the swirling edge of the maelstrom, The crew stood on the bridge, bathed in the eerie glow of the shifting vortex ahead. The entire Galactic Council watched through long-range transmissions, expecting to witness yet another doomed attempt. Final system checks complete. Mac call from engineering. Hull integrity optimal. All redundancies online. Engines at full readiness, Jin reported, her fingers dancing over the NAV controls. Elias cracked his knuckles. All right, people, let's do the thing they say can't be done. With a deep breath, he pushed the thrusters forward. The Odysseus surged into storm. The chaos of the maelstrom. The moment they crossed the event horizon, the universe went mad. Space twisted. Colors that had no name bled across the spectrum. Gravity screamed in every direction at once. The ship's sensors went berserk, throwing up impossible readings, velocities exceeding light speed in negative directions, temperatures colder than absolute zero, time moving backward and forward simultaneously. For any other species, this would be instant death, but the Odysseus was built for this. Dr. Voss was already processing the data in real time. Rourke, we have stable eddies forming at these coordinates. Feed them into navigation. Jun's hands moved like a blur. Adjusting course, hold on to something. The ship dropped, or maybe it was thrown. The view outside twisted, and suddenly they were inside the storm rather than fighting against it. A corridor of relative calm. If only for a moment. Mac cursed as an alert blared. Gravitic destabilization in the lower decks. If we don't fix it, we'll be ripped apart at the molecular level. Rourke didn't hesitate. Fix it. Mac was already moving, sprinting toward the maintenance shaft as the ship bucked like a wild animal. Meanwhile, Voss stared at the screens, her brain working through equations that had never before been tested in reality. This storm isn't random, she whispered. It's a pattern. Rourke turned toward her. What do you mean? She typed furiously, bringing up visualized models of the vortex. Everyone assumed the maelstrom was pure chaos, but it's not. It's fluctuating in fractal cycles, like a natural harmonic wave, but across dimensions instead of frequencies. Jun's breath caught as she realized what Voss was saying. You mean it has a structure? Voss nodded. And if it has a structure, then we can predict it. Rourke grinned. Then let's ride the wave. The first breakthrough. The next few minutes were a blur of motion. Every second, the Odysseus teetered on the edge of destruction, barely dodging reality-tearing rifts, countering gravity surges with split-second engine adjustments, shifting between harmonics that had never been mapped before. The Galactic Council watched in horrified fascination as the human vessel did not break apart. Instead, it moved with the storm, twisting, adapting, surviving. And then, against all odds, they found the center. For the first time in history, something reached the maelstrom's eye. A perfect calm void. A place where the impossible storm did not exist. The crew stared in stunned silence. Floating in the void, bathed in an ethereal glow, was something no one had ever predicted. A structure. Massive, ancient, alien beyond comprehension. A station? A ship? A gateway? As the realization settled in, Voss whispered the words they were all thinking. Someone built this. Chapter 2. The Architects of the Storm. For a long moment, no one on the Odysseus spoke. The maelstrom, an eternal tempest that had defied entire civilizations, had a center, a structure built by something, someone, and humanity was the first to see it. The station, if that's what it was massive, easily the size of a small moon. Its surface shimmered with an unknown material that seemed both organic and metallic. It lacked the harsh, angular construction of warships or the rigid efficiency of industrial megastructures. Instead, it flowed as though it had been grown rather than built. It was old, so old that its presence felt more like a whisper from a forgotten era then an active sentinel. Rourke swallowed, his voice hoarse. Tell me someone's getting this on the record. Voss exhaled sharply, fingers dancing over a console. Recording, mapping, scanning, trying to understand whatever the hell this is. Zhen's eyes darted across navigation readouts. The maelstrom isn't just around this place. It's being generated by it, like a defense mechanism. Mac's voice crackled over the comms from engineering. You mean to tell me that someone built a storm that kills planets as a lock? I hate these people already. Not a lock, Voss murmured. A barrier, something meant to keep everyone out. Rourke leaned forward. Until us. The first step into the unknown. The Odysseus drifted closer. Every sensor trained on the structure. But the deeper their scans went, the stranger the readings became. No energy signatures that made sense. No transmissions. No sign of atmosphere. And then, suddenly, a signal. It wasn't a language. It wasn't a pattern. It was simply a frequency. A single, steady pulse emanating from the heart of the station. An invitation? A warning? Voss's voice was quiet but firm. We have to go in. Zhen let out a nervous chuckle. You mean the impossible human expedition into the impossible storm is going to dock with an impossible station? I just want to make sure we're keeping up the theme. Rourke smirked. We didn't come this far to turn around. The Odysseus adjusted course. A hangar-like opening yawned before them. No lights, no docking beacons, just a vast, black maw leading into the unknown. Inside the abyss. The moment they crossed the threshold, everything changed. The outside world vanished. No more stars. No more maelstrom. Just darkness. Then, as if sensing their arrival, the station woke up. Light, soft golden and pulsating, flickered along the walls. The ship's systems freaked out, not in failure, but as though they were being read. Every sensor went haywire, not because they were malfunctioning, but because they were receiving too much data at once. Jin shuddered. I think it just scanned us. Mac, having rushed back to the bridge, exhaled. Hope we pass the test. A moment later, a doorway appeared. Not a mechanical hatch, but a seamless section of the wall that simply stopped being solid. Beyond it, a corridor stretched into the depths of the station. Voss checked her readings, then shook her head in frustration. I can't detect anything inside. No atmosphere readings, no gravity fluctuations, nothing. It's like the space beyond that door doesn't exist. Rourke adjusted the magnetic lock on his boots. Only one way to find out. They armed themselves, standard plasma sidearms, scanning equipment and emergency transponders, and stepped forward. As soon as they crossed the threshold, the doorway sealed behind them. The architects. The corridor wasn't just smooth, it was seamless, as if the entire structure had been shaped from a single piece of material. No rivets, no panels, no separation between walls, floor, or ceiling. Soft pulses of light followed them, moving ahead as if guiding them deeper. Then, the first shapes appeared. Statues? No. Too detailed. Bodies. Humanoid, but taller, with elongated limbs and intricate, chitin-like exoskeletons. They were frozen in place. Their features caught in expressions that humans instinctively recognized as shock. Some had arms raised offensively. Others were turned as if running. One, positioned near what looked like a control panel, had its fingers outstretched as if it had been trying to activate something, before it was petrified in place. Mac exhaled slowly. They didn't build this. Zhen's voice was tight. They were trying to escape. Voss moved toward the nearest figure, running a scanner over it. They're not petrified. This isn't stone or metal. Her brow furrowed. This is biological stasis. like they were frozen at the molecular level. Rourke's fingers tightened around his weapon. By what? No one had an answer. The corridor led into a vast chamber, and at its center stood something different. Not frozen bodies, not alien statues, a throne, and on that throne sat a figure, different from the others. It was larger. Its exoskeleton was smoother, more intricate. A leader? A ruler? A scientist? It sat motionless, its head tilted slightly downward as if asleep, or waiting. The moment they stepped closer, the air changed. A deep, vibrating hum filled the chamber. The golden lights flickered, and then the figure moved. A slow, deliberate tilt of the head. Jin swore. Mac raised his weapon. The alien opened its eyes. Two pools of shifting darkness, like staring into the event horizon of a black hole. Then, in a voice that did not belong to vocal cords, but to something deeper, something ancient, it spoke. You are not what we expected. The Odysseus crew became the first living beings in history to hear the voice of the Maelstrom's creators. Final chapter, the last gatekeepers. Silence, not the silence of an empty room, nor the vacuum of space, but something deeper, a silence that pressed against their bones, a silence that suggested something vast, ancient, and unfathomable had just noticed them. The figure on the throne, taller than any human, clad in an exoskeleton that shimmered between colors they could barely perceive, slowly rose to its feet. Its movements were fluid, deliberate, and utterly inhuman. Yet, somehow, there was something recognizable in the way it tilted its head, observing them with those void-dark eyes. It had spoken, not in words, but in understanding, its voice pressing directly into their minds like a whisper from the depths of the universe. You are not what we expected. Captain Elias Rourke's hand hovered over his sidearm, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he squared his shoulders and stepped forward. We weren't expecting you either, he said. You built this place? The being's head tilted further, almost curious. We did not build. We were left behind. A cold weight settled in Voss's stomach. Left behind? By who? The alien lifted an elongated hand and gestured. The walls of the chamber shifted, becoming something else. Not solid metal, not screens, but vast, rippling display of memory. They saw a galaxy that was not their own. Spiral arms teeming with light, but not stars. Structures, massive beyond comprehension. Linked by webs of energy. Worlds arranged in precise patterns, as though designed rather than formed. An empire that did not conquer, but crafted. Then, fire. A darkness that moved. Not a fleet, not an enemy in the way the Galactic Council understood war. This was consumption, a force that erased, that unmade. They saw ships flee, entire civilizations vanish, and finally, they saw the last survivors, this species, the beings before them, seal themselves away within the heart of the storm, not as conquerors, not as rulers, as gatekeepers. We were the last, the being intoned. We made the storm to keep the darkness away. Rourke's blood ran cold. The maelstrom wasn't built to keep people out. Voss whispered the realization. It was built to keep something else from getting in. A long pause. Then the being stepped forward. And now you've opened the door. The breaking of the storm. The crew barely had time to react before the station shuddered. The golden lights flickered, then darkened. A sound, low, grinding, something waking up. Jeanne's hands flew to her scanner. Something's wrong. There's a... Then the maelstrom itself trembled. For the first time in recorded history, the eternal storm weakened. The howling chaos beyond the station's walls lurched, as if something outside had felt the shift. Max swore, "Please tell me that wasn't what I think it was." Voss's voice was barely a whisper. "Something's coming." Rourke turned back to the alien, whose dark eyes remained locked on them. "Can you stop it?" The being did not answer immediately. Then, with something that might have been regret, it slowly shook its head. "We were never the architects. We were only the warning." Voss's mind raced. There has to be a way to reinforce the maelstrom, to reactivate whatever's failing. The alien simply watched them. Then, in the same deep whispering voice, it said, "You are not what we expected, but perhaps you are what is needed." And then it reached out, one long-fingered hand pressing against the air. A surge of information slammed into the human crew. Not words, not speech, but understanding. Equations, technologies, instructions. The knowledge of how the maelstrom had been shaped, the science behind the impossible. It poured into their minds like an ocean, too much to grasp at once. Then the being collapsed. Its exoskeleton cracked. The golden light in the chamber faded. Rourke lunged forward, but it was already too late. The being's body froze, just like the others, its final action complete. The last of the gatekeepers was gone, and the maelstrom was failing. The last human gamble. A klaxon blared aboard the Odysseus, emergency systems detecting the breakdown of the storm. If the barrier collapsed completely, whatever had been held back for untold millennia would pour through, and humanity would be responsible. Rourke snapped into action. "Voss, tell me you can use what it gave us." The scientist was already at work, fingers flying over her datapad. "It's not just data, it's an entire system. I think we can patch the storm's breakdown, but it's going to take everything the Odysseus has. If we fail," Mac grunted, "then we make sure we don't fail." Zhen's hands tightened over the navigation controls. "Captain, I'm going to need you to trust me." Rourke met her gaze. She had piloted them through hell itself. She had felt the storm, understood it in a way no machine ever could. He nodded. "Do what you do best." The Odysseus turned, not to escape, but to fight the storm itself. Engines burned white hot. Every ounce of power was rerouted. Every experimental system pushed beyond its limits. The ship dived deeper into the collapsing maelstrom, threading through violent ruptures in space-time. Zhen's voice was calm. 30 seconds to core stabilization window." Mac cursed. "I'm literally duct-taping the reactor together back here. You better not be wrong." Voss stared at the raw equations scrolling across her screen. The last secrets of an extinct race. And now, humanity's problem to solve. She rewrote the numbers. Rourke's hands gripped the controls. "Zhen!" The navigator's eyes snapped open. "Now!" Rourke slammed the command. The Odysseus unleashed everything. A pulse of energy impossible by galactic standards, shaping the maelstrom from the inside. The storm roared, and then it held. The breach sealed. The howling void beyond the galaxy remained locked away. Aftermath. The Odysseus limped back into normal space, scorched and battered but alive. The Galactic Council, who had expected to witness yet another failed attempt, instead saw something unthinkable. The storm had not ended. It had been rebuilt. By humans. The impossible barrier, which no civilization had ever understood, had been restored by sheer human stubbornness and recklessness. And at the heart of it all, humanity now held the only knowledge of how to maintain it. For the first time in recorded history, the great elder species of the galaxy were forced to admit the truth. Everyone said it was impossible until humans tried. And now, the fate of the galaxy rested in their hands.